Rydo, and we are back to another live stream of Shadowverse. Today is Friday, February 5th, starting later today, as it seems to be pretty much the standard for the moment. Yesterday was quite the nightmare. Like, the past couple of days with my Wi-Fi have been terrible because my actual internet service provider has been going down intermittently too, so I don't know if any of my network troubles at all aren't actually my ISP's fault, and I actually should have just never changed any settings at all. Uh, but I've been trying to work on it and just been this incredibly disorganized mess. At a certain point, I just decided, let's just start over from scratch and hand copy in all the codes instead of just backing up the settings and reloading the settings, which really, for DDWRT, there isn't much difference between doing one and the other, but whatever. By the way, this private match, I could not in like 5 minutes get anyone to join me in a private match. It was in the middle of the night, but apparently if you're not doing a special celebration, doing private matches are pretty impossible. Or at least it was in that instance. So yeah, I just redid everything. Tried to kind of eliminate some things that I don't think ever worked and tried to work on it, but constantly I was running into problems of the internet itself being down, and then everything just not working because of that. Because let's face it, a router for the most part is not going to work if the upstream server, as it is broken. Okay. We're still waiting for this new Eternal Awakening expansion to release the new cards, because I think I have all the Eternal Awakening. I can double check that in a second. So yeah, that's been a huge frustration. The only other thing I've done is I've tried to get I've started playing Danganronpa, which, okay, it's yet another visual novel. I'm trying to rush through it, hopefully before I watch any more episodes of Game Grumps, which I'm gonna try real hard to hold back on that. One of the things, like, speaking of self-control, that probably would have helped me a lot in working with my router is if there was some self-control, or if I was working for, say, a IT boss of some sort, he probably would set down some priorities and not just have me jump around randomly like I am doing and trying to do everything in one go, because I'm trying still to get Unbound at the moment to work so that I can have DNS over TLS, and I've made some level of progress on that, but also the internet was down, so next time I work on it, maybe it will work perfectly if I can just get 5 minutes in which the network doesn't drop out. I guess all of this in a lot of ways is just a warning that at any point my network can drop out. Also, since I eliminated and changed a bunch of settings on my QoS, I wouldn't be surprised if we have less of a smooth operation today as far as playing games. I guess we'll try one game with Runecraft and then one match with Bloodcraft, and then we can do whatever we want. Which, if we're gonna do Bloodcraft, let's do that Bloodcraft deck that we got temporary to start with. So yeah, that's been a nightmare. Danganronpa is a slow visual novel, to say the least. The prologue took me like 2 hours and 40 minutes to get through, so I literally have yet to even move forward in chapter 1. That's really, really slow. I'm going to try to speed it up as now they've unlocked the game. It's really a great example, I think, of of not having a prologue being a better move. Had they jumped into the action kind of quickly and then had some flashbacks if necessary later, that would have been better. And frankly, a lot of what happens in the prologue is you'll meet someone and then you'll immediately flash back to this research you've done on one of the characters, since each of the characters are supposed to be the ultimate at something. Like one of them is the ultimate baseball player. Then like you could have just met that person, not flashed back to what is a pretty bad stationary image of looking at a computer and looking at a forum on a computer to get information. It's not like any of the info that is being revealed in the flashbacks is secret in some way that the character wouldn't really tell you. All the secret information that's not being said still is not said at the beginning. In fact, there's very little reveal at all in the game, except for like some basic things that might be revealed much later on. But yeah, there's really not a lot to say on Danganronpa. There was a lot of side conversations certainly I had. It's the idea of having a school that brings all the best of the best together. Is segregation of prodigies from normal people, and a government funding a school to be the best school of the best schools is a Japanese thing that they almost certainly would do, but it's not good. Like, inherently that is the argument against charter schools in the United States too, is that you could potentially have this charter school that might get more funding, although I don't think they typically do, but I imagine they find some ways to get some different funding, and they're teaching different things than what all the other students are. And if school has any value at all, which is honestly a big if, the one thing you would want is for everybody to have the same level of education and same level of opportunity, and you're just not going to get that if you have a special school. Of course, that doesn't really matter that much, because once they get into the school at the very beginning of the game, they realize that it's not really a school that's going to educate them anything at all, and instead it's a school where they're either forced to live together in harmony forever, which it's kind of a bad selection of high school kids if you were actually hoping for that to succeed, or they have to get away with a murder and not be discovered. So yeah, that sets up the whole premise of the game, is that there's a group of high school students who are focused around the idea of escaping by murder, which is the only opportunity offered to them or told to them. Can we do Wrath? Actually, succeed in any way.
Mankind's tenacity will exterminate you, vermin.
Hey, check this out!
Let's settle this, you evil bloodsucker. You don't belong here.
No, you're not getting away!
You don't belong here. See you around, Slick.
Okay.
You have summoned the blade of purgation.
But yeah, the actual game of Danganronpa is half visual novel, half murder mysteries.
Me once I got my speedy boots on.
It's certainly kind of obvious why all of the characters are drawn in weird wild anime styles is because they want to be able to make those characters memorable and interesting looking. It kind of puts like 999 in comparison to Shame, because while there was like one or two interesting looking characters in the first Nonary game, mostly the a lot of the other characters are kind of dull looking and easily forgotten. Even Junpei is not particularly a standout as far as their appearance. I would also say, since it's a PSP game originally, Danganronpa is, that you run into a scenario where the graphics don't look particularly good.
Okay, this one's all me.
Let your soul succumb to the void. Lock the light.
Mean son of a gun, ain't you?
Well, since it's Friday, and since there's not really anything new that, not really any motivation to go very long, I think we'll just go through the video game news.
I lost. You're tough.
Hopefully over the weekend I can test the settings on my internet connection, which I really just rolled back my connections. The one thing I can do to pat myself on the back, and this is barely one thing, is that I took one step into being slightly smarter about having backups and made a backup from a condition on the router that seemed like it was a working condition, and then I reloaded to that. So right now I'm in that backup settings, and I don't think they do any of the security stuff, but it's working. So if I could just stick over the weekend and see that it's going to consistently work, that's fine. Even now though, I can see that my third TV, newest TV, which is connected by Wi-Fi, is flickering as an indication that it can't connect to the network. So that might be because it's doing something it shouldn't be doing anyways, which is always trying to connect to the network and wasting bandwidth, which frankly it's easy to kind of turn a blind eye to the massive number of Internet of Things or always connected devices in a even medium household that are just constantly calling home and constantly looking for connections and bandwidths. And certainly it is a possibility that some of my network problems have been the fact that I've just got dozens of apps on my phone or my computer that are all just calling home every 5 minutes to check for new emails and stuff like that. So I set the quality of service to say, hey, you know what, just slow down those checking for email signals. That's not important. Yeah, slow down like Windows Update. That's not important. There are some unique scenarios there for like Steam auto updates games, certainly, but also if you wanted to download a game from Steam, you probably would want to download and install it as quickly as possible. So there are two scenarios in which a router is not going to really be able to tell the difference there, and it's not like there's scheduling you could do to, well, yeah, oddly, I guess there is no quality of service scheduling. I guess there's really no reason for that either, because if you set Steam updates to update in the middle of the night, that's probably when you're not using it anyways. Okay, well, yeah, not much of an accountability section, frankly. I did also try to still get that last achievement on the Game of Life, and I did it by playing as 4 like characters at once, thinking, well, if the second player character gets the achievement, it might count towards the first player control achievement, since you're not capable on Steam, or at least if there is a way to log into a different Steam account as the second player. I have never seen a game implement that, and that that is something that probably would be better worked on by Valve and Steam. Like that would make a good amount of sense to have multiple profile logins. I know Xbox allows for that to some level. I don't know how much of it is actually implemented these days, and I know I'm sure PlayStation does it too, and Nintendo does it too. But once again, who knows how well they implement any of that. Moving on, we have a article here. Destruction All-Stars hotfix now mutes voice by default. Oh, I thought the scroll bar was set to auto hide. Why is that not working again? I thought I had set that after the last stream. Let's see. Minimal scroll bar, pin that. Options, set the auto hide. Weird. Not only did the settings not save, but it is set to auto hide, so why is the scroll bar still showing? Maybe you have to reset with Chrome. Okay. I don't have a clue what Destruction All-Stars is as a game, though. So this is almost an advertisement for an unknown game. And certainly putting out a patch to just auto-mute people does not seem like a particularly worthwhile venture. As something worth talking about, or as something to promote as some amazing improvement. So it must have been a problem for real. Alright, well, lose the game there. Go out on my own terms. I would kind of like to see this temporary deck succeed more. It doesn't really make a lot of sense that the temporary deck still doesn't really work that well. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Burst Squad, which looks to me like it's a first-person shooter asset flip game. There's just not enough polish there, and then we're seeing kind of like completely different graphics there. Early access $1.19. That's way too cheap, so easily dismissed. Here we have a game called Cartridge Master, which is some kind of turn-based, like, I would say Pokemon style game is the best way. Almost like a Monster Rancher game, I think, more than anything. But $21, $24 for VR. It's a little expensive for a VR game, and while there might be a decent enough visual polish here, it's pretty low polygon. And maybe a little bit asset flippy too. Let's see, well, what do we want to get rid of? These two? So that's going to be a no. Gamatsu has an article here. Guilty Gear Strive for the PS5 and PS4 open beta test set for February is set for February 18th through 21. That's another thing about playing Danganronpa is my brain to my mouth connection is not as good as I would like it to be. These are fighting games, but they're for the PS4 and PS5 only, seemingly. Let's see.
Mankind's tenacity will exterminate you, vermin.
But yeah, trying to read things out loud properly and pronounce things is tough. A lot of Danganronpa has also been me just kind of explaining things once again as to how I understand the Japanese culture, which is heavily influenced by watching mostly anime. So, but also trying to step out from that and realize that not all anime is real, or not everything in anime is real by far. But like one of the things certainly of Danganronpa is the idea that there's TVs in every classroom is kind of unbelievable. Even in the United States, having TVs in every classroom is unlikely. And then cameras in classrooms certainly is really unbelievable.
You don't belong here.
Although I do suspect that unless we as a world decide that all schooling is going to be remote always, which I don't think they're willing to do that, and I think we would probably swing in a much different direction and start having sleepaway dormitory schools where students are just sent to a dormitory school for most of the year or all of the year, and they only visit their families on or see their families on holidays, which that's what they've done in the UK.
What is it you desire?
You
But
don't belong here.
if there's a middle ground there and they do try to embrace and prepare for remote learning ever again,
You don't
there
belong
is
here.
a decent argument to try and get funding to put in a decent pan tilt zoom camera inside every classroom, and then classrooms potentially could be
Step at a time.
more like
I can do this.
streamers stages, so that the teachers can record
We can do this together.
and stream their classes directly online, and then you still would have probably desks, and perhaps you would have a smaller percentage of students that are doing it locally, and there might just be a split there. The middle ground to that, I imagine, though, is that there will more than likely be fewer classrooms in use if you're going to implement that, because pan tilt zoom cameras are definitely not cheap. So you're talking, once you've got the whole setup and equipment set up and making it idiot proof so teachers can use it, and so it works with the terrible networks that most school systems probably have, you're probably talking for each classroom, with the markup of government being billed, I would imagine somewhere cheaply between $600 per classroom, more expensively and realistically $1,300 to $3,000 per classroom. That isn't just for a PTZ camera, which you could probably get one for about $300. That's a good quality and works, but you then have to connect that to some back-end servers. You've got to connect the software. There's probably a lot of development there that would be needed also. Do you want to play this? Oh, do. I guess you want to play this.
You have entered the lightless domain.
Yeah.
Ow. Ow. I lost. You're tough.
There might be some decent benefits to going to dormitory schools, but none of these schools in the United States are built in such a way to accommodate that, and getting a whole bunch of extra room is not going to just come out of nowhere. You could potentially, every school in the United States has a football or soccer field, so if you break down construction on that and build towers, and you squeeze students in very close together like they do in most colleges, you could fit them, but then you also running into the danger of infections. I did see an article on like Reddit talking about how a bunch of colleges are complaining about how they're going to lose a bunch of money because of football being canceled effectively, which really just goes to prove how most colleges are focused around selling football tickets and running athletic programs, and they just teach classes as a side hustle. And I've said several times and stuck very firm to the idea that the athletics department should not exist as in the form that they exist in colleges and schools. There's a difference between physical education and learning to be healthy and active, and then pushing yourself to unhealthy, unnormal extremes to become a professional football player, basketball player, whatever sport. And it's clearly the center of corruption in a lot of the corruption stories that come out around colleges, with frat life and Greek lifestyles being the partner to that. Moving on though, video games. We have Muv-Luv Unlimited the day after now is available for Steam. Apparently several of the Muv-Luv games have been listed on Steam at the same time, which, okay. Yeah, it's like Muv-Luv the day after episode 1, 0, 1, 2, 3. Let's see. It's a visual novel series from Anchor, which I haven't heard of that company. Muv-Luv Alternate Chronicles. This is probably a spin-off of a main story Muv-Luv series, which that's quite the name. Certainly. And it's, I think, military anime girls in mechs for the most part. So a little bit for everybody. If you like mechs, if you like anime girls. There's even some anime boys in it. Looks like it's high action. Yeah, I can see why that's a seller in these outfits. Definitely look fairly skin tight and perhaps not revealing, but imply quite a lot. As the one thing you can do in animation that you can't pretty much do in the real world without a whole lot of double-sided tape is you can make clothes in animation that is just so incredibly tight and sticking to every curve and crevice of the body that the character is effectively naked anyways, or very, very close to it. Whereas, like, if you're gonna real world make a suit for somebody like this and cosplay this, you'd probably have to make a latex bodysuit and vacuum out all the oxygen, and it still probably wouldn't move the same way this is animated. There's quite a lot of that, which really, if you get deep into the research of it, if you want to, which I imagine most people don't care, there's things that certainly are so incredibly standard in anime that you just would not really even realize how away from reality they have gotten. What? Why did that not die?
Oh, waffle cakes.
Hmm. Hmm.
Tasty.
Let's go ahead and evolve this, I guess. But yeah, of course there's obvious things that are fairly standard in anime that break things, like all the Japanese people having very different colored hair and hairstyles, and almost every story being some level of out of the norm and extreme, but that's not even that weird for stories in general. But yeah, and the big eyes certainly are obvious things, but then there are subtler middle ground things that create this fantasy world that are usually fairly connected and consistent across almost all anime, because almost all anime is influenced by itself and its predecessors. Yeah, and at a certain level, it's not lost on me that more and more of this YouTube channel has become the otaku anime loving channel in video game form. I have kind of let my freak flag fly a little bit more on that than I did originally, where I was playing the Binding of Isaac and playing the weird freaky game there. It was probably inevitable. Like, I definitely liked anime many years before I started my YouTube channel, so it was just gonna naturally come into consideration. But also, certainly, once I had made the idea that I was going to try and cover and talk about most games that and that did not have the exclusion of Japanese games and Asian games, that opened that door. And that is really the reality that I think a lot of mainstream video game journalists in the West are trying to hide, is the fact that, yeah, about half of all the games, if you just compare the numbers of games, are in some way anime inspired, and unless you actively are censoring Western, non-Western games, or games that have the anime art style, which almost all mainstream Western video game critics are, you're going to have to talk about them and consider them. And if they make up half of the entire industry of video games, and you're a critic who's covering games in that industry, then you have to realize there's some merit there. Even if it is, in your own personal opinion, just going to break down to the idea that that video game players have bad taste, that still is just the case of it. That's the truth of it, and that's the way you have to address it. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Haunted Nightmares, which looks like an asset flip, top-down kind of horror wanderer. You're wandering around looking for keys. This is such a basic game compared to what we normally see. I would have suspect that this is like a student project. Yep, nope, it doesn't say anything about being a student project. English, allegedly full audio. Yeah, that looks like nothing. Now, it is not lost on me that you very well have the same argument that I just made could be made for low effort asset flip games also. That we might be in a scenario where there are so many low effort asset flip games being made that they too should be considered and talked about and not just ignored. And I guess the difference there is the number of people actually buying this, or at least the general feel in which I think people are buying games, and I would say visual novels. The good visual novels are getting bought in very large numbers. The low effort asset flip visual novels probably not. So if Steam and Valve released sales numbers, which they would never do, and you could sort and filter out games that have sold less than a certain amount, which it would be real easy. It would be real easy to say, sort any game that's sold less than 1,000, and that would be a real YouTube, Twitter, Facebook type of censorship there, where they would just kind of effectively not promote and not show games that have less than 1,000 sales. Thus, games that have less than 1,000 sales on day one are inherently going to never get 1,000 sales. So that kind of falls apart as an idea immediately. And I do think that Valve is a little bit more libertarian than that, and thank goodness. Next we have a game on Steam here called Unlasting Horror, which that's a terrible name just because unlasting is not a word. In fact, pretty much this is early access, $6.39, and I am just getting wrecked. Alright, so here's Muv-Love, the day after episode 00, which we can see, yeah, it's a visual novel, and the trailer sings its praises a little bit more. I kind of like to see what Anchor has. Now what they're doing here is they've effectively sold 4 episodes of games that might not be that long for $72.86, which is a decent amount of price. They're comparing it to Trigger Happy Havoc, which is what I'm playing right now. And then if you want the Megaverse, which apparently includes some other Muv-Love games since 2018, which the original Muv-Love, that's $175. So yeah, I guess you put this on the fall list. And then I'd like to see if Anchor has released anything else besides Muv-Love. Nope. Interesting. So why is the original game not on the fall list? Like, this is really where it would come down to. And see, this one has nudity and sexual content on it. So, yeah. If I was going to go down the Muv-Love route, apparently the later games kind of eliminated that, at least as they're being listed on Steam. So Muv-Love Alternative was in 2017 released on Steam, where this was 2016. And then it's back to sexual content in 2019, which is kind of just highlights how Valve has gone back and forth as far as what kind of content they allow. This one has nudity in 2020. And then this one's just casual visual novel, casual visual novel, casual visual novel, casual visual novel. So it's definitely going back and forth, as it were, between, is this an adult series or is it not? I would think from the trailer here on episode 1 and the thumbnail that, yeah, there is an indication here that you are at the very least going to see these characters naked a couple times or have sexual commentary. Now, this game is actually even more expensive for episode 1. I really would want to see the reviews here in particular because there is certainly a question as to how long the visual novel would be, or what the quality of the visual novel would be to justify that. But you also run into the problem, certainly, of a big commitment here. Let's just assume, at minimum, each of these episodes is 30 hours long. 4 games, you're talking 120 hours for the unlimited alternate chronicles of a long-running visual novel series. And Muv-Luv definitely isn't in the top 5 visual novels out there. It's not Steins Gate, it's not Chobits. It might be the new Steins Gate or Chobits, but I still think that historically speaking, it's probably better to play Steins Gate or Chobits first. And it's certainly not a case where I'm getting more and more free time. Like, honestly, I feel like if I was to try to cover visual novels in more of a larger quantity, I would want to ideally have a YouTube channel where it was 2 or 3 established hosts, and each of them were big into visual novels, and they would tell each other about what's going on in different ones and report back. That I think that is probably the way you would want to go with a system like that. Having multiple people talk about it. That's kind of what the Bombcast originally was, but now it's kind of absolutely not what the Giant Bombcast is, because none of them are really playing games much at all anyways. Like,
all I need's an opening and you're toast.
which certainly there is an argument to be made that right now, in the middle of this pandemic, when there's just no games being released, no AAA Western games being released, now would be the perfect time to release a to have some of the people on your staff cover visual novels and go back and play older games and older whether the visual novels or not. And they just kind of don't do that. They return to playing things like Dota, or they replay old games that they've already covered and played, which there might be a decent reason to do a retrospective, but at a certain point you're just actively avoiding playing new games of a style you don't want to cover. On the other hand, maybe Giant Bomb has the numbers behind it to prove that actually there's just no interest at all for that kind of footage. And at a certain level, it might be a question about who really is the video game playing community. Is there a single characterization of video game players these days, or is it just this wild mess of everyone? Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Dangerous Solitaire Zombie Fever. Mixing zombies and solitaire is a pretty dumb idea. Like, zombies are known for high action, solitaire not known for high action. $2.99, English, French, German, and Russian. We haven't been flooded with a lot of these solitaire games lately, which thank goodness for that. Let's see. Well, we can do this. And we can do this. And then just, I guess, evolve here and get rid of this.
I am beyond prophecy. This is my fate after all.
Let's see. Gamatsu has an article here. Capcom sales update. Monster Hunter World Iceborne is at 7.2 million. Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Trilogy at 1 million and more. So Resident Evil has sold 3.6 million units. RE2 remake has sold 7.8 million. So you can kind of see how there's a fairly big split there in the sales of just 1 year. I imagine RE3 will never catch up to RE2. RE7, on the other hand, is the latest new game in the series, and it's at 8.5 million, which there is probably some disappointment if this number overshoots this number, which was out a year or longer before this game came out, because that would almost be a nail in the coffin, proving that people are only interested in playing the early Resident Evil games, and they aren't as on board with the newest Resident Evil games. But I don't think there's too much of a risk of that, because Village does seem to be people seem to be very excited about it. Danger there certainly is that it might turn into the next Cyberpunk 2077. I wouldn't be surprised one bit if Capcom dropped the ball on Resident Evil Village and it turned out to be quite a mess. This is the million sellers list that they maintain. So there's every game that Capcom has released ever, pretty much, as far as a million sellers, billion units sold. And the fact that you barely are over 100 over the long life of Capcom probably says some things too. Well, I screwed up there. Some of these games that are million sellers are like Mega Man 3 and Final Fight for the NES and Super NES too. So when you think about this came out in 1990, a 1,000,008 units sold is a much better seller than something that came out in, say, 2014 and has barely 1,000,000 units sold. It also probably in part shows that there's less than you think as far as the number of units that you can sell in making a game and selling a game. Like, there may be 7 billion people in the world, but that doesn't mean you're going to get anywhere close to 7 billion units sold for any one game.
I'll fry you to a crisp.
And that brings you back to the idea of what is a good number, and usually somewhere over 300,000 units is when it starts to be of note a decent seller for a video game. And of course you need more sales if you're making a AAA game that has to recoup a lot of investment versus a small indie game that you don't have to recoup that much of an investment in. Next we have a game on Steam called Dream Escape. This looks like a VR Infinite Runner, or yeah, Infinite Runner with guns and shooting, which at a certain level that is kind of interesting. It's like a lane shooter as a concept, but I wouldn't want to play that in VR. It doesn't look particularly good. $8.99 is a decent price for VR. I could see having kids play a game like this and not being too upset, although you do have them shooting with kind of realistic guns and a little bit more thought and polish there. Could have had them shooting like Nerf-like guns instead. Okay, how can we do this? Can we save the day?
How empty it all is.
No. No, we can't. Let's see. Next, we have a game called Love in the Distance, which is tagged as a word game, which I think that's probably someone who doesn't even understand English. Interesting. It does kind of feel like you are a word adventure game based on a long-distance relationship. I would call this a visual novel, regardless of the format that it's being depicted as. That might be an interesting idea, certainly for a visual novel, though, instead of having it do the same old visuals that they usually do. It's $1.99. It's English and Chinese. I bet it's not that interesting. They just call the main character Hero, and he chats with like 3 other people. Yeah, I'd like to see that concept improved upon. That would potentially work in a visual novel. Frankly, what you would want to do is integrate that concept as a secondary gameplay mechanic. So most of the time you're talking face to face and looking people in the eyes, which in most visual novels they're not animating the characters with emotions that much or showing their eyes anyways, but you want to at least have that feeling. But then every now and then you could have the text message, the phone call, the interaction. Yeah, there's undoubtedly a lot of weirdness in the way that the newer generation of people interact with each other, particularly right now in the pandemic, but just in normal. I think having a all 100% online relationship now is considered a lot more real and valid these days. I think you definitely are going to have the newer generation have at least partial relationships at distance through cell phones, through not even direct message phone calls, but just texting and maybe even TikToking and sending photos and things like that, whatever the newest fad is. Right. Okay. Make a copy of that.
We won't give him an inch.
And then
I'm just warming up.
kill that. Or just wait. Next we have a game on Steam here called Gluttony Sword, which to my shock, we have a real game that looks like it's actually good here. There's enough visual polish here. It kind of looks like a Zelda inspired game. You're top down hack and slashing, you're avoiding puzzles. In the video trailer you get a better look at it than the screenshots, which inherently that does imply that there is a decent number of times in which I might have just looked at the game based on screenshots and ignored it. But yeah, I would hope that I would not dismiss a game that looked this visually polished, particularly amongst all the terrible games. It's $3.49, bunch of languages. I'm gonna put this on the follow list. Like, just because we are unlikely to get big AAA games to come out does not in any way guarantee that we have to have we have to have garbage games from indie publishers also. There's plenty of opportunity for every single day for there to be a decent indie game to come out. And hopefully, fingers crossed, there are a lot of people right now who have nothing better to do with their time on their hands, who are either programming a game for the first time and potentially making a good indie game, or programming a game as an independent person for the first time. We may see quite the downfall of big publishers. We've been seeing a buildup of publishers over the past 4 or 5 years. If it turned out, once this whole pandemic happens, or if it turns out like a year from now, a lot of AAA developers have been secretly working on side projects in their free time, and they released them all, well, that could definitely change the way things work. And Steam would be positioned fairly nicely as far as the self-publishing platform of choice, because there's definitely not any barriers at the moment to be a self-publisher on Steam. It's just $100, and that's about it. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article here, Valheim Guide for Beginners, which this is basically an advertisement for a game called Valheim, which we saw this and I already looked at it and it just didn't look particularly interesting to me. It doesn't look like a terrible Viking-esque survival mobile game, but yeah, just not really seeing it. Let's see. Maybe what I need to do is,
I will support the vanguard. Carry on.
let's see.
Mean son of a gun, ain't you?
Appearance. I'm looking at Chrome's abilities. Nope, Chrome does not have under its settings a way of turning off scroll bars. Yeah, so I bet I just need to reload the thing and that's it.
The uncharted desert awaits. The uncharted desert awaits. What do we have here?
No. If
There
I
we go.
fall,
In turn, I guess. Let's see, next we have Three Kingdoms, The Last Warlord, which clearly is a Chinese game. Yep, looks kind of like a mobile phone game ported to Steam. $10.99, nothing there of interest.
I need more fear. More
Next we have a game called Exit Strategy, which I think is probably a asset flip, kind of troll joke game more than anything. Definitely does not look like anything that has any real polish here. Early access, $8.99 English. Clearly they're pushing for online player versus player with this glitchy imagery in this trailer. Here we have a game called Fortuito Lost History, which looks like it's a monster shooter with some bad graphics, just not polished at all. Probably a little asset flippy. $1.69, bunch of languages. I do feel certainly for developers that might make a game like that, and they may very well have an idea, but that idea just does not have any, it just doesn't have any polish to it visually, so you're effectively ruining your chances of succeeding.
Seasoned sleetings. My armor's
There
been
we go.
pierced.
Do I want to evolve? Let's not. But on the other hand, for Tuito, if it did have an idea here, it is completely lost with just the generic gameplay mechanic and the generic visuals.
My resolve.
So yeah, that's in a funny way, the beauty around something like a visual novel is that if you did have a story that you wanted to tell and specific visuals you wanted to show, you do have that opportunity to make a game that is barely a game, and release it as a visual novel. But if you want a horror first-person shooter, then you're going to have to compete in that field and actually do a very good job.
I've steeled myself for what lies
Okay.
ahead. Mana, come forth. A samurai is pathetic. Kazaru, Kazaru.
See. Could deal 1 damage. Or I can draw a card.
Serve in hopes of a better tomorrow. Lawful evil. Chaotic good.
Alright, well that sets me up to kill that character. Meanwhile, let's... Can't evolve there, can't evolve there. Moving on, we have a Gemetsu article. Activision Blizzard's financial call says Diablo 4 and Overwatch 2 will skip 2021. New remastered content is planned. There's nothing left of Activision and Blizzard at this point. It's like this little dangling pixel is about the remaining percentage, I would feel like, of the original teams that worked at Activision and Blizzard when Activision and Blizzard were held in high esteem. So the idea of a Diablo 4 coming out and being good would have to be a miracle. The idea of Overwatch 2 coming out in time and being successful and catching people's attention is highly unlikely. I feel like they're very possibly going to just chug along until they run out of their war chest and run out of their financials, which, as long as they can keep a decent number of people playing World of Warcraft and their other games, they'll be able to survive, but I imagine they won't do much. I wouldn't be surprised one bit if 10 years from now we're still talking about Activision Blizzard, but only in the breadth of updates to World of Warcraft.
Nothing to fear.
Okay. Okay. Now what do we want to do? Evolve this?
This match is mine. Our melody will never
Hit
finish.
that.
Everything all right here?
Hit that. Next, we have a game on Steam called Madness Robots. This is a tower defense game with a different angle in its visuals. I don't know if this is a particularly good angle. It looks like a cell phone game. Doesn't seem like it could be particularly complicated, and it's just using pixely voxel graphics. $1.49 English, 12 achievements. I wouldn't be surprised if that means it has only 12 levels. We have a job listing from Gamasutra. Wooga is hiring a senior QA test engineer in Berlin, Germany. I've never heard of Wooga as a company.
Follow me if you can.
Let's see. Tegraptor has the same article. Overwatch 2 not releasing this year. Do you actually even need a Overwatch 2? Or could you just constantly be updating Overwatch 1? I guess Overwatch 1 is just old enough that that it wouldn't be impressive to just put out a new patch, or call it version 2.0. Inherently, this is the catch-22 of games as services, is that you want to keep people playing, but you're not going to be able to keep people playing, and then you want to add new players. So to add new players, you irritate the people who are playing by releasing a different game, the next game in the series. And You really just can't serve two concepts at the same time. Let's see, paying for 4 to an enemy.
Watch closely, apprentices.
Hit that.
Everything all right here?
Hit that. If I can manage to succeed here. Here we have a game called Gun Reviper, which is a shoot 'em up game of some sort. And the gray background really makes this look unimpressive. Otherwise, the game itself doesn't look terrible as a shoot 'em up. It's just not my kind of game, and it is at a weird tilted angle where it doesn't seem like it's going to give you a lot of opportunity to see what's about to hit you. And it seems like there's coin collecting elements also, which is kind of weird. This is early access for $14.99. It's English, Japanese, and Chinese. That's, I think, too expensive for my blood. Right.
Watch closely, apprentices.
Deal 4 damage there. And then beautiful steed.
I'll serve in hopes of a better tomorrow.
Okay.
You don't stand a chance.
We'll change things for the better, you hear?
Then we'll just go ahead and attack this.
Well,
And then
everything
go
all
ahead and
right
attack
here?
that.
This outcome pleases me.
Next we have Rugby Challenge 4, which, well, there's a lot of visuals here. I imagine this is at best a rugby game, but in reality it's tag simulation, so this is incredibly deceptive advertising, showing all these screenshots when I don't think it really is a game where you control the players. But maybe it is. Maybe you actually do play as the players. I don't know how popular playing rugby in particular is in video games. $49.99. English, French, Italian, Spain, Spanish. I definitely wouldn't want to play rugby on PC. I really just feel like rugby is such a it is such a hands-on action game that the idea of playing it in video game form seems just kind of silly. You could do 2 damage to this, and then just leave that. Can I evolve this? No. Do the full steed.
I go with the wind. Lawful evil. Chaotic good.
Okay. Gotta hit that. Can't evolve anything else anyways. The new Telltale Games put out a announcement that the old school Sam & Max Season 1 is now free DLC. This is the 2007 original version, so they had taken it off from sale. Now, remember, there was some small censorship that happened when they remastered it, and they really didn't do a massive amount of remastering anyways. Yeah, I just I imagine that that's really what they're addressing more than anything by putting out the original version, but it does also kind of seem like they're still going to try and patch and fix actual problems like disabled save game button during the closing credits. But they aren't probably going to. They probably aren't going to do any censorship after the backlash. And at a certain level, this is exactly the kind of backlash I would want to see, and how I'd like to see backlashes like that go. Is that people come out and say, no, we don't appreciate the censorship. We don't want that eliminated.
Worth their salt.
Let's see. You can summon an Earth Essence. You draw more cards. You could pump up.
Why, you've got the face of a chameleon. Earth and assault.
Interesting.
Let hope
So
shine
this will
on.
do 10 damage if I can actually attack. So ideally this would be a case also that the new Telltale has learned a lesson, and they will at least address any changes or censorship that they're going to do for any remasters going forward in a better way. But also it was definitely a case of where they had really no motivation that was going to help them. There was no good reason to make any changes to an old game, storyline wise. Just bug fixes, make it widescreen. If you can remaster the graphics, great, but don't change anything. Don't pull a George Lucas, as it were, which the idea that anybody has not learned that lesson from George Lucas is kind of crazy, but certainly everybody thinks they're smarter, and everybody wants to put their 2 cents in, and they want their name attached to some decision that they think will show them to be smart and
Time to get started.
successful.
I hope you're ready to escort me.
And it just kind of never happens. Like, the only reason we know George Lucas's name is because he made changes to Star Wars, and he was the main creator of Star Wars. The idea that you would know directly that Adam Savage worked on Star Wars is highly unlikely, except for the fact that he is also a YouTuber that I followed enough around to know that he did work on Star Wars. Prop, at least one prop. Moving on, we've got a game called Psycho O'Neills, which that's an interesting idea between like crazy people and colonials. It almost seems like an insult against United States people from British people. Unfortunately, the level of graphics here is pretty awful. This is $9.99. They're saying it's similar to Lorelei, which I would almost definitely not agree with. At least Lorelei has an art style and not just MS Paint looking graphics. So yeah, this is a skip just on the visuals alone. Let's see, we have a Q&A from Gamasutra on producing a bigger Borderlands. This is from May 2nd, 2019, so Gamasutra just retweeted that, so that's not news.
Check out my fancy footwork.
They trick me every now and then with that.
Melt under your touch.
Let's see. We have a Gamasutra article here. EA has made $3 billion in net bookings from just Star Wars games. Which, okay, good for it. Now that EA doesn't particularly have an exclusive license, that might be some amount of money that they are going to lose. I guess people have been
Breach of contract.
less interested in chatting these days. Like, it does feel like it's been a month and a half or longer since anybody even jumped in the chat to say anything. Not that I'm begging people to chat. If people don't want to chat, then people don't want to chat. Or maybe it also is an indication that I'm just getting fewer views on live streams, which would almost be nice. If it could be like actually proven that YouTube is just not emphasizing live streams as much anymore, and instead they are pushing the pre-recorded footage, that would be great. I couldn't completely eliminate doing live streams, but I could probably, with playing Shadowverse in particular, bring it down to like maybe Wednesday and Saturday, or particularly if I just curated a lot of the games that came out on Steam and didn't talk about all the garbage games that came out. Ideally, that would save me time. But yeah, I'm definitely in a situation where I don't know if that's specifically because of the quality and the number of viewers and subscribers I have on my YouTube channel, or if that's just a general thing that's happening everywhere. People definitely have been busy, so it's not surprising. And a shockingly high number of people seem to watch my live streams while they were at work or at school. Let's see, next we have a game on Steam called My 10-Day Girlfriend, which is tagged as an RPG dating sim. It's decent animation within kind of chibi characters walking around. Not sure that there's a real game here. I'm not, I guess it doesn't matter. It's $3.19. It's Chinese only. It doesn't look terrible though. I've never heard of Soma Games. Like, there's a game called Soma, so that probably would lead to some confusion. So play this. And then do this. Destroy an enemy follower.
How dare you! Hey, check this out!
There we go.
You have summoned the blade of purgation here.
Let's see. Well, I've got a lot of tabs around this, but we'll try and cover this only once. The ZeniMax founder and CEO Robert A. Altman has died at the age of 74, which you can take your guess as to what he died of, I imagine, and that's probably the case. I don't know. They never really mention this. At a certain point, ZeniMax is not a good company, so it's kind of silly to be particularly upset that someone who ran a company pretty badly and was very sue happy and has been pretty terrible about producing new good games. This would be the person in charge of not only creating Skyrim, but also creating
I'll see you in purgatory.
Fallout 4, and then Fallout 76, and then pushing towards other
You have
garbage
summoned the blade of
mechanics.
purgation here.
Horse armor, but let's not forget that old chestnut either.
This whip is an extension of myself.
Let's defile the
So,
battlefield.
yeah. On one level, yes, though, he is a human being, so you don't want to ignore that fact either, but
I did it! I won!
yeah, it took a long time to get a victory, but that's better than Wednesday, where I don't think we got a single victory. So now we just need a runecraft victory, and then we can play whatever we want. If you wanted to be really crazy, and I shouldn't even say this out loud, you could be tinfoil hat and mention that, yeah, ZeniMax is in the process of being acquired by Microsoft, Although it seemed like the EU was going to have to approve that, and I doubt that the CEO was against that acquisition. If anything, this might be an indication that he knew he was going to no longer be involved, so he pushed the acquisition. That's equally believable, at least. And at a certain level, it may not change too much because Microsoft, I doubt, is going to try and put somebody in charge of ZeniMax from their internal ranks who knows nothing about running a video game business. If anything, this would be a great opportunity to have Reggie Fils-Aimé be hired by Microsoft. He was working in Nintendo of America, which was in Redmond, Washington, right where Microsoft's offices are also. So, but I don't know ZeniMax's offices. I don't think are there. So yeah, you could probably do a decent job around the idea of hiring somebody like Reggie Fils-Aimé to be the CEO of ZeniMax, and maybe then he could turn around ZeniMax and make it a better company to make games from. Arguably, ZeniMax as the parent company, I don't think does much good for the world anyway. So, if Microsoft were to shutter ZeniMax and just hold on to the subsidiaries, that might be a very good way to go. Also, let's see.
You look kinda haunted. No, literally.
Like, Microsoft really does not, here they list it, like, Microsoft really doesn't need ZeniMax to oversee and be a middleman to Arcane Studios, who made Prey, and Bethesda, who made Skyrim, or id Software, who made Doom. Those could be very separate companies, just directly under the watch, the slight watch of Microsoft.
I haunt you too.
And at a certain level, yeah, getting rid of the middle management, which is what ZeniMax would be at this point, would be the right move. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article here. There are no plans for the Medium DLC, which is probably good because people aren't sounding particularly enthusiastic about it. But that might change, which at a certain point, that is always the case. Like, the Medium at the moment, I think, is only on like PlayStation. So it's on PC and Xbox. Yeah. So maybe I'll get around to playing it. Maybe I wouldn't. There's a lot of games like the Medium that lose a lot of their appeal fairly quickly. And there's just not a good argument to ever get back and play them. I think Life is Strange is kind of in that category also, where I played Life is Strange 1 close enough to its release, but I don't see a good reason to go any further in that direction. TechRaptor has an article. The Humble Asmodee digital tabletop together bundle is now out, which, let's see, Ticket to Ride Europe DLC for the Ticket to Ride game, I believe, and then several other tabletop games I don't recognize. And then, well, we'll look at this. We can just kind of look at this right now and talk about it since we're already talking about it. The thing I would say is Asmodee's digital's development of digital games isn't particularly great. So
sweet enough for
you do have this
Fill the emptiness.
situation where, like, in theory, I would like to own Small World and Pandemic on the Brink and Love Letter. Actually, this is probably a great game. I think I will get this. Whole bunch of DLC here. I already own Ticket to Ride.
How did I lose?
A 30% off an actual board game, though. Isn't that great? Yeah, this is a pretty good deal, I think. Like, a lot of these games are not amazingly well reviewed. Like, this is mostly positive, but this is mixed. But these are also kinds of games that I would like to own. Here you have Ticket to Ride France is negative. And that's why I never bought the DLC. Love Letter, a lot of these not even getting reviews. Yeah, that's a decent bundle. It's been almost 5 months, I think, since I found a bundle of any sort that that is within reason to the games I already owned, because there was just so much overlap and I just own so many games on Steam anyways. Moving on, we have a opinion piece here, set rotations in Magic the Gathering, a mobile free-to-play perspective, which, yeah, Magic the Gathering
Don't underestimate
at
me.
this point
A dazzling victory awaits.
is either they do have the cell phone versions out now for Magic the Gathering Arena, or they have they are very close to releasing it. Of course, I would never go back to playing Magic the Gathering Arena, so I kind of don't care now. Rotation is widely accepted with a positive mood, even celebrated amongst their audience. Which, if that is the truth, then I definitely am on the wrong side of the audience there, as far as that, because I found, particularly as someone trying to get back to playing Magic the Gathering, the set rotations following just the standard rotation of the printed card game really did not work for me. It just kind of sucked, to say the least. Let's play this.
Galaxy of gems tumbles and twirls.
Let's see. Of course, Bethesda tweeted out more things. This is the look you would like to see in a CEO. If anything, maybe he's a little dressed down with a sweater and such in this picture, but that's not it's not sleazy business suits. And frankly, at this point, I feel like sleazy looking people in business suits need to just die to the annals of history, because
I'm just warming
there really is just no good reason to be wearing a suit these days, and it's time for fashion to change. Nobody really wants to wear it. I can see the argument that lawyers and politicians should be wearing suits, but even that, like a lot of court cases, you have a lawyer wearing a fancy suit and the judge wearing a traditional robe, and then that pushes the clients and the accused all to have to wear suits too, and so that you're just propping up this suit industry for something that just is kind of pointless.
Rains from above.
It's hardly like we are getting so incredibly cold and we don't have air conditioning, like, or it's so dusty and dirty that you would need layers of clothing to protect you from that, which is a lot of where that idea came from.
Stops me once I got my speedy boots on.
Okay. Allied Amulet leaves play. Right.
I'm just warming up.
Drowned in light.
Earthen assault.
Mhm. Of course, that's, I guess, just a bit of a rant. It went all fun in the anti-suit rant, but yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. Next, we have a game on Steam called Freelancer Life Simulator Prologue, which that's just a mumble mush of words. Free to play, bunch of languages. It's obviously just an asset flip game. Dutiful steed, someone. 2 damage to all enemy followers. I literally don't think I can play anything.
Earthen assault.
So,
Drowned in light.
I'm just warming up.
just attack, I guess. Variety has an article in here. YouTube has hired Sony Pictures TV executive Craig Hunter to head the preschool kids original content, which at a certain level I can't hate this idea terribly. Like, I don't think Sony Pictures has particularly been great at making content in general, but I don't know if you can blame one specific exec for that. He is a person of color, obviously, but a male, so still not high enough on the ladder as far as SJW people being ranked by their persecution level. But yeah, getting away from that, the idea of YouTube making preschool content themselves is an interesting competition to individual YouTubers making content targeted to underage kids, because they don't at any point, YouTube, they wouldn't have to really try and monetize that, and so by not having to really monetize their content and yet still getting the same effect of effectively attracting kids at a certain level to watch YouTube, you do have a nice scenario there where you can succeed fairly easily. Of course, that does introduce the idea that YouTube probably cannot create enough preschool content to really succeed on its own. But it certainly could start down that path and partner with people like Disney and like trusted partners to bring YouTube Kids to a level of being more like a cable channel and less like a just separate app with a random assortment of uninteresting content, which is, I imagine, what it is right now. I don't know. I haven't looked at YouTube Kids lately. I did look at it once, but back in the early day when they were still, some of my videos were coming up under YouTube Kids, and I'm like, oh, I didn't say that. So if you think that's kid friendly, which sometimes me playing the Lego games probably is pretty kid friendly. That is one of the things that's weird about Danganronpa, is one of the characters just cusses up a storm. Like, every sentence he's got at least one bad word coming out of his mouth. I'm like, oh man, this character is going to be a pain. But good news is I know that he isn't going to stick around that long, and I think it's probably a localization issue where he probably talked like a gangster and very rough, because he was a gangster, I believe, and they translated that into English by having him cuss a lot more. Next, we have a game on Steam called Battle Tank, which is just a tank for $11.69. That's a joke. see. 4, 4, 6. Birthright. Dutiful Steed. Hmm. 4 damage to that.
Watch closely, apprentices.
And
I'm just
go
warming up.
attack that. Let's see. Here we have Chess Brain Dark Troops, which is a single screen Unity game, puzzle game. 99 cents, bunch of languages. Doesn't look terrible, doesn't look particularly interesting either. That's a decent price though, for what it is. Amazon's next CEO vows to help the struggling Amazon Game Studios bounce back. That's Andy Jassy. And this is a Gamma Sutra article. Okay. Do I want to see Amazon Game Studios succeed? Not particularly. Like, when it just boils down to it, I don't think benefits the video game world much to have Amazon become once again involved in a new industry just to intend on ruining it one way or another later. Next we have a game on Steam here called Warm Adventure 4 Into the Wormhole, which I haven't seen 1 or 3, and this looks like it's just an asset flip swinging game where you play as a worm that has like a laser thread that it can swing on. $4.49 English only, that's way too expensive. Let's see. If we do this, and then we do this.
It looks like I'm up.
I shall give
Next we have a game on Steam called Primal Dungeon, which looks like it's a Joust clone or a platformer with hack and slash abilities. There's a decent amount of animation here, and this is not terrible in a thumbnail, but the actual game seems to be kind of lacking content. Kind of seems like you're just doing the same thing everywhere. 69 cents English only. Yep. That's another one of those games where it feels more like a more of a proof of concept game instead of an actual game. Right, well, we'll have to do this. Then we'll have to do this.
Got the face of a chameleon.
And then in the turn. Gametsu has an article. The Akira Yamaoka teases a new project to be announced this summer. I'm quite sure it'll be one you've been waiting for. This is the person who made Rez, I believe. And so we're thinking that a new Rez game potentially is coming out. Or spiritual successor to Rez is coming out. Gamma Sutra has an article here. Vertigo Games acquires the location-based VR arcade platform Springboard VR. Let's see. Tech Raptor has the same obituary. If anything, I would say that we are getting to a point where companies like Tech Raptor might start to be getting better at having having obituaries pre-written and ready to go.
I guess you're
Like,
looking for a
this is
fight.
interesting. His wife was the original Wonder Woman actress Linda Carter in 1984, and their 2 children, James and Jessica Altman. He'd been married for 37 years. That's much more of the human story here. He founded it with another person named Christopher Weaver. As a full holding company for Bethesda. ZeniMax had Robert Trump, brother of former President Donald J. Trump, and MGM's Harry Sloan on its board. But being on a board is really one of the most obvious and blatant ways of cronyism and the rich keeping each other rich by literally paying people to sit on a board and meet maybe once a year, or maybe just teleconference once a year to take in huge paychecks. Now, at some level, almost certainly in some companies, being on a board actually does require a lot of work, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's not the case for most people. And you have pretty much zero hope of ever actually getting on a board yourself if you're not rich or well connected. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article. Call of Duty publishers have been sued for copyright infringement around the image of this lady character. Let's see. Clayton Haugen, Haugn, is a writer who has sued Activision Blizzard over the basis of them stealing her Cade Janus character in Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Haugen created Cade Janus character as part of a concept art and a story treatment that was created to draw interest from movie production companies. To do so, he posted his protected images on his website and social media in order to demonstrate his talent and provoke engagement from film studios. So here we have, can't make that much bigger. So here you have a female with black hair and big guns, which that's not particularly that strange. And then you have in comparison, Mara in-game character. At a certain level, this is a great example of something that should not be copyrightable. And we've had lawsuits already kind of settle this, that if you're not using the exact name of the character, you probably aren't going to be able to sue for likeness, even if you do trace it. Remember the GTA case against, I believe it was Lindsay Lohan, established that. But at a higher concept, this is just a human being. Like, it's not a particularly unique hairstyle. We're not going with like wild, crazy anime hairstyle or depiction at all. This is a standard necklace or a scarf that you would probably wear in the military, or have seen that people wear in general. She's wearing a generic black shirt, black gloves. She's got a real world gun. Arguably, the manufacturers of a gun model might have more of a lawsuit than the creator of a character. She's got like a knife on her belt. It seems like she's just wearing jeans, but it's in so much blackness. Yeah, without a real case here of them using the real name, I don't think this lawsuit is going to be settled in favor of Clayton Hagen. Or maybe the lawsuit will be settled just to make them go away. And inherently, I imagine there's a case where lots of creators think their ideas are stolen because their ideas are just not that unique or that different. And on the other hand, I wouldn't be surprised one bit if Activision Blizzard at some level did steal the idea. It's just unfortunately incredibly easy to steal ideas for big companies to steal ideas from small individuals and get away with it. That Tardigrade's lawsuit against CBS has, last I heard, pretty much been settled in favor of CBS, who there was the Tardigrades video game that sounds very, very similar to the events of Star Trek Into Darkness, or what is it? It's like STT. Star Trek something Through Darkness or something. It's not the Picard series, but the one before that. It kind of went nowhere. And they may still be making it, or claiming that they're still working on it.
Is that a human?
This match is mine.
But yeah, that lawsuit also seemed to not go the way the Tardigrades game developer had hoped.
A fitting end.
Let's see, we have a game here called Field of Glory 2 Medieval, which it has this top banner art, which this is new.
How did I lose?
I've never seen this on a Steam listing before. This is a strategy RPG, of course. And yeah, doesn't look particularly interesting to me. $26.99, online PvP, single player, bunch of languages. If you are into strategy games, this probably is a pretty decent one. It's just that's not my bag. Which that's a really old phrase to use. Next we have a game called Battle Cruisers, which it's all in shadow and thus looks terrible. $4.79, English only. Next we have a game here called Blue Fire, which I believe I saw a review of this from TechRaptor, and so we'll cover that later, but the thing I skimmed was that this looked really good, but it played very badly. It's $17.99, I guess, for safety's sake. It crashed 5 times in less than 1 hour. So, yeah. So, crashiness, but crashiness can be fixed. In fact, that's probably the best reason you can possibly have to have a game reviewed poorly, is that it is just functionally performing poorly. So I'm gonna put this on the fall list, and 6 months to a year from now, when I do a fall list cleanup, I think we will hopefully it will be patched and fixed and will actually run. Otherwise, Robbie Studios and Graffiti Games are going to embarrass themselves. We can see their previous things that they've listed are a mix of mixed and positive reviews. So it might be a case that there's just an inconsistency in quality in general as far as the games that are published by that publisher.
A galaxy of gems tumbles and twirls.
TechRaptor is continuing down its path, A Link to the Past, the development timeline of Ocarina of Time. Apparently, at some point, Child Link was not even included in the game pitch, and so when they introduced the idea of a Child Link, that probably introduced the idea of time travel in general, and would have drastically changed how the game played. It would have been a very standard Zelda game if you were just playing as adult Zelda. But yeah, it probably wouldn't have been that terrible. You just would have had all of the abilities at their max level that you have as adult Link, and you wouldn't have the lesser child items and abilities, which at a certain point the next game where you're just turning into a wolf to solve some puzzles kind of, well, that I don't think that was the direct next Zelda game, but the game where you're turning into a wolf to solve puzzles really did feel like it was just a tacked on gameplay mechanic instead of a completely different style of gameplay where child Link versus adult Link were completely different styles of gameplay that were integrated well into the story also and had reason to exist. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Nemesis RPG, which looks like it's an RPG Maker game. And yeah, there's never anything really you can say about that. English is not supported. $6.39, French only. What's interesting here is you kind of have this fantasy thumbnail, and then you look at this RPG and it kind of feels more like it's taking place in a medieval or modern time. This looks like a modern world, this scene, but of course that may just be because they're just asset flipping RPG Maker content.
Embrace your vast potential.
So you attack here,
Best of luck to you. I'm just warming up.
attack here,
I'm just warming up.
attack here.
Opportunities abound.
Let's see, next we have a game called A Day, which is tagged as a pixel graphics relaxing action adventure. 2D side-scrolling open map. You play as 8 characters. Reach the highest score possible.
No, literally.
I don't think there's enough of a game here.
Looks like you've got another spirit. Wait. How did I
$2.79 English Italian. I'm gonna put this on the follow list just in case this is a hidden gem, but honestly I don't think it is. And then I am like, the only thing I could be doing different is just playing different decks to just get random victories and then re-roll the attempt to get RuneScape Runecraft victories, which that might be the smarter move. Next we have a game on Steam called Foglight Online, which looks like it's an ugly game where you play as a werewolf. It's early access, it's online player versus player, it's free to play.
Mother,
Yep.
father,
I don't think there's enough there to gain an audience. Gamasutra is still pushing GDC, so they have Polish Your Pitch in Jason Della Rocha's GDC Masterclass. Yeah, we have a game just called Nuts, which this is a unique art style, but it actually looks like there's polishing on the actual intention. Single player surveillance mystery game. Record the squirrels, report your findings, and piece together what's really going on in the Melmoth Forest. Interesting idea. $16.99 is a little expensive. English full audio. I'm gonna put this on the follow list, but honestly this is one of those games where I like the concept of being a crazy person who's spying on squirrels. I don't like the idea of paying a premium for something that is a gamble like that, though. Here we have a game called Legend of Vengeance, which I don't think that's how you spell vengeance. Vengeance, if anything, would be the way you pronounce it. This kind of clearly is a Chinese language point-and-click adventure. $3.59 Chinese only. This frankly feels like this was something that was a project that would have been an English game, and then they lost the contract or ran out of budget. And it certainly seems to get very weird by the time you have this morphing into a anthropomorphic cat-like character.
The uncharted desert awaits.
Stay away! Ow!
Let's see. Moving on, Gamma Sutra EA Play now has 13 million players across all platforms, which that's probably less impressive than it sounds, considering how you pretty much are forced to have an EA Play account in most cases to play an EA game. Right. Do we want to play this, or do we want to just attack?
What do we have here?
Let's just end the turn. Engadget has a rumor here. Apple's mixed reality headset could cost $3,000 and include 8K displays. That sounds pretty crazy to me. You certainly are not going to get into the world of gaming at that level and that price. On the other hand, Apple's mixed reality headset may not be targeted towards gamers, and it may be targeted more just to very, very, like, overpriced, big, rich people. Although I'm not sure how many more of those people even exist these days. Yeah, we already talked about that, so we don't need to talk about it again. Here we have a game on Steam called Infected Prison, which is tagged as a simulation RPG puzzle. To me, it looks like an asset flip game where maybe you wander around a prison. Actually, there's a decent amount of polish here. First-person VR game during a zombie apocalypse, $12.59, English and Chinese. Some of these screenshots don't look bad. I kind of would want to see video though. Let's see, so video, this is just a trailer, this is See, walking around in a zombie apocalypse in VR might be a big turnoff for most people in VR. I don't know how many people would want that or like that. It seems like you just walk through things. At some point you have an archery mode. And at some point you have guns. If anybody was going to do this really, really well, I'm going to put this on the follow list just to see if what the reviews are. But yeah, if anyone was going to do this really well, you'd almost have to make an on-rails shooter in like the Resident Evil universe. That's about the only way I imagine something like that would succeed very well. Is if you had the backing of Capcom and the experience of Capcom. Okay, TechRaptor has an article here. Valve and Perfect World are going to launch the Steam China beta on February 9th. The two games that it will have, the amazing two games, the first two games will be Dota 2 and Counter-Strike Global Offensive, so two Valve games. The only reason why Perfect World is even involved here is because it's a Chinese company. How will this affect Western Steam? If Chinese users migrate to the country's new native platform, it'll impact reviews and recommendation. This is assuming the Chinese Steam platform is completely separate from the Western one, and that Valve doesn't bring anything across other than account details. Suddenly Chinese users' reviews, recommendations, playtimes, and other stats will vanish from Western Steam, says TechRaptor. I don't know if that's really the case. This could have both a positive and negative effect for some games. And then they're talking about the controversies in the past between China users and review bombing games. Personally, I would like to see a lot of these low effort Chinese games disappear from the Western Steam storefront, but I don't see a reason why anybody would do that, frankly. So as the Chinese version of Steam comes out, we might see a small, I would bet no higher than 20% reduction in low effort Chinese games released to the West, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's as low as 0% or even in the negative numbers, and we start to see even more low effort Chinese games listed in the West, because why not? If you spend the effort to put it in the Chinese store platform, why not also list it to everyone else? And at a certain point, that there's an argument to not like zone lock and censor your game. If you actually believe your game is good and you want people to see it, there's an argument to say, well, we can list this in the Chinese store, but let's also list it in the Western store too.
There you are, my little trespasser.
You too.
What an oath.
Yeah, I love this job. Of course I do.
Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Gustavo Kingdom Rebirth, which this might also be a Chinese game, but it's got some 3D model characters and slightly scantily clad outfits, hacking and slashing. And I'd say there's about a medium level of polish here, and from the video it looks like there might actually be a game here. There's too much brightness in some of the images. Like, this is really one of those games where it would be reviews that would save it though. $4.99 and Chinese only, so yeah. We might start to see a specific limitation of games that are Chinese only being listed in the Western market, Steam, and the rest of the world's Steam storefront. I can believe that, because it doesn't really probably benefit you that much to have a game that is only Chinese language being sold outside of China. Next we have a game called Petrification Under Ruin, which clearly this is a low effort asset flip game. They're just flipping 3D models and things. English not supported, $8.99. And this one's Japanese, so yep, we have one of the rare cases here of someone making a terrible low effort Japanese RPG game. There probably is an argument to say that if you are living in a small country like Japan, let's say there's 1 million people in Japan, just to pick a round number, it probably doesn't occur to you that putting your game on Steam is then going to, there's probably more than 1 million. There's probably, I would say 800 million people in Japan, but yeah, it probably feels a lot different to list your game on Steam if you're living in a small country, in a small town, than if you had more of a worldly perspective and said, oh no, there's thousands upon thousands of countries and well, probably hundreds of countries with millions of people all over the place, and you can't just assume that good enough is good enough. You have to actually make a very good product because there's a lot more competition. I don't know how Valve could impress that on people, or Steam can impress that on people, other than potentially making them look at over 1,000 other games, which would be a weird requirement to submit your game from Steam Direct. You have to go through this curator feed and look at 1,000 games under the categories that your game is listed as, and you need to put like a thumbs up or a thumbs down as to whether you think your game looks as good as this game does. Like that would be a weird requirement, but it would also be a great requirement to waste people's time, so they can't just flood Steam with garbage games. Moving on, Gamasutra has an article. The Ubisoft Toronto co-founder Alexandre Parisot departs Ubisoft. So Ubisoft is losing someone. I'm not sure if this is one of the people who had accusations against them, but Ubisoft in general has accusations of just hostile workplace environment in general. It seems like Gamasutra is not going to get into the weeds here. If anything, I wouldn't be surprised if there were no accusations against him, but they also didn't want to stick around after all the bad press that's come out about Ubisoft in general. Here we have a game called Rogue Star Rescue, which is a top-down twin stick shooter, visually polished decently well. It's just, once again, not my type of game, kind of a bullet hell top-down twin stick shooter. It's rated positively, but yeah, $11.99, bunch of languages. So if this looks interesting, you check it out. For me, I'm just gonna skip it. What do we want to do? Rush? Yeah, that'll work. Let's see. Next we have a game called Extreme Soccer, which these look like either very unique custom artist characters or at least very polished asset flip characters. It's an interesting thought to play soccer, first of all, in a tank top with your belly exposed, because you're definitely gonna either run on this. This looks like cement. Playing soccer on cement instead of grass sounds insane too. They're calling it street football, but then they label it soccer for Americans. This is just like a really weird outfit that like is kind of ridiculous. It's hypersexual for a game. It's also kind of weird to be playing co-ed soccer in general, but alright. But yeah, this definitely has more of a sleazy Chinese mobile game feel to it than anything. You have other outfits you can buy, and some really ridiculous looking guys too. It's early access for $15.99, and if anything, by the looks of it, it's either English or Korean. Which, okay, that might explain some of the weirdness if it was Korean.
You have no right to tread here. You have no right to tread here.
The hunt has only begun.
You think you're strong enough?
Yep. I can't put a game though at that price on the follow list. It's just missing quite a lot of content. Like there's no heads-up display, 3-on-3 soccer doesn't seem like much. In all fairness, compared to most low-effort soccer games I've seen on Steam, this actually does look like there actually is a game here. But yeah, it's still not enough to catch my attention.
Should I fall? Even should I fall?
ain't you?
I owe those women a debt, you see.
Next, we have a game on Steam called A Hole in Space, which is obviously just a particle physics simulator for $4.99, English and German. Yeah, we tend not to get low-effort German games. Next, we have a game on Steam called Project Hive,
Tiring early.
which it's a little dark. Monster third-person shooter. It's free. Is it a student project? Yes, it was. English and French. So yeah, this is a student project. I'll put it on the follow list, or on the wish list. Arguably, it might not ever be enough of a student project to really highlight anything, particularly if it's not doing anything that different or unique. Okay. Accelerate the cars, we can't do that. We can rush. And we can attack.
I won't let you get away.
You can still turn back. Gotta carve a way through. You're in for it now.
See you around, Slick.
I tried to find these Atelier Trilogy games on Steam, and either they're gonna just bundle them on Steam, or there isn't a new listing yet. So that's something I'll just have to keep an eye out for. See, next we have a game called Rope the Cow, which is clearly a joke game with swinging, just like a Cut the Rope clone. Let's see, $3.59, bunch of languages. Right. That, and then that, and then that.
No right to tread here.
And then evolve.
This is the end.
You think you're strong enough?
And
Away
then
with
attack.
you.
In my eyes.
And in the turn. Next we have a game on Steam called Cat's Menace, which they're tagging it as an idler and a visual novel. Interesting. It seems like a text-based game where you are
Ends here.
talking to cats. They say it's a dark story from the life of cats and people who will own the city. $3.99, English and Russian. That seems like a low-effort Russian game to me. Let's see, do we have the hardware sales now for Mitsu? Or the software sales? Let's see. We've got the train racing game. What's new? Disgaea 6 made it to 23,000 units sold in its first week as far as software, and Disgaea 6 for the PlayStation 4 sold another 15,000 units, which again, these numbers kind of do go to show that, like, if you have a game on its week one launch is selling less than 25,000, the idea of listing your game on Steam might really feel like you are really only going to reach maybe 100,000 to 200,000 instead of probably 1 million or more users of Steam. I wouldn't be surprised if it's closer to 100 million. Then hardware sales are continuing. PlayStation 5 is still getting trounced every week by the Switch, and the Switch is pretty old at this point. It's not new by any means. And even the Xbox Series X and S is doing better than the Xbox Ones were. I did damage my Xbox One controller, or Xbox 360 controller, so I'm now in a situation where I might be well off to I might be well suited to buy a new controller, and I didn't really need to do that. Or you know what? All I did really was break the rubber around the left stick, so I could probably just peel off the rubber there and not even notice it, or just leave it since I just peeled it back a little bit. I'm not seeing anything with Disgaea 6 though, as far as major changes in how the game actually plays. So I'm still not in a situation where I think I would want to play it after rage quitting Disgaea 1. Or lightly rage quitting Disgaea 1.
You are my little trespasser.
I don't need a gun, not when I have
What
no
an
worries. See you around, Slick.
Next we have a game on Steam called Vectors, which looks like it's a low effort physics simulator or pathfinding simulator.
Allow me to enter
89 cents, English only. Nothing there of interest. Here we have a game called Athena, which is just rabbits in jigsaw puzzles. 69 cents, English. That's a decent price, frankly. And the little puzzle pieces have little rabbit ears in the puzzle pieces. Is it always rabbit ears? Yep, it's always rabbit ears, or mostly rabbit ears. Let's just jump around the random things while I'm trying to wrap up here. Here we have a game called Henry Mosey and the Wormhole Conspiracy. Mossy? Is that Mossy? Probably. Let's see. Point click adventure. Looks like it actually has some polish to it. Looks like an actual game. It's been few and far between. $16.99, still a little expensive. English full audio, but also German on the interface. I'm gonna put this on the follow list. It's been kind of a while since I played a point and click adventure. I'll get around to it though. If anything, I imagine playing visual novels has eaten into that point and click adventure feeling, since they are fairly similar styles of game. But I know I'm going to play Indiana Jones and Fate of Atlantis and then the other two Indiana Jones games, which aren't point and click adventures. So those are ideally by the end of 2021, all of those will have been recorded and released. Or at least recorded. And I really haven't scheduled any videos in a while too. Let's see. Is it even worth it to play anything? I don't think it is. Next we have a game on Steam called Qomp, Q-O-M-P, which looks like nothing. Looks like a frustration bouncing off walls game. Here, the ball escape. $5.94, English only. Interesting, the achievements here also seem to be just white boxes or a black box. Which that's all I can really make out from what I can see.
Laces, everyone. Work starts at sunset.
Let's see. Next, we have a game on Steam called Monolith, which this actually looks like a decent game. But are you being forced to make the dungeons yourself? And is it potentially a multiplayer game? It's a fantasy action RPG with collectible card game and dungeon building merged together. That seems like quite a lot. Free to play with a level editor and in-app purchases. Well, a game like this, since it's free to play, I can just say check it out if you're interested. I'll put it on the follow list just to see some reviews, but more than likely I'll never cover it. And honestly, it does feel like one of those games where where it would be too busy to try and stream while playing a game like this. It's just too much action. So it couldn't be like a replacement for Shadowverse or anything like that. Here we have a game called Remember When, which they're tagging as a choose your own adventure 2D game. I think it's probably just kind of a Western visual novel. It's free. Seems like it's not very long. Put this on the follow list. But there definitely is a question as to why you would release a game like this, made in Game Maker, unless you're just trying to establish your skills, which I can believe that. I kind of love this art style too. It's so unique and Western. It's not just trying to clone the anime art style. It's got its own little flaws, but it's consistent and decent enough. It's not the awful Cartoon Network, Disney Channel art style we often see. Let's see. Might do 5 damage instead. Let's see. Gamatsu has an article. Elemental Knights Online R is now available for the PS4. This seems like it's a chibi RPG game. It is also available worldwide for Switch and iOS and Google Play. So yeah, more and more we see these cell phone first type of games getting then retroactively ported to other things. This transforms into a giant skull, destroys a follower. Let's try. What's this one do? I could do this and then this. And then do I want to do this?
Does this outfit make me look too old?
And then evolve this. And that. TechRaptor has a review here for Werewolf the Apocalypse Earthblood, which just looks like a game, which is weird because I haven't heard anything about this. Or maybe I have, because there was a game where you played as a werewolf that came out relatively recently. Yeah, and if I recall correctly, it wasn't well received. They give it a 3.5, which is probably one of the lowest review scores I've ever seen. Summon a Necrofauna, summon 2 Necrofaunas. Let's see. Destroy a follower, both people reanimate. Let's do that.
Mrs. Mittens, we have work to do.
Let's see. Hit that. Hit that. And then hit that. Hit that. So, yeah, 3.5 review. Having a hot werewolf can't save Werewolf the Apocalypse Earthblood from its many problems. A boring story, super repetitive combat, wonky stealth, atrocious butt rock are just some of the many issues. Pros, the werewolf is hot, combat feels okay for about an hour, pretty rad final boss themes. Cons are bland story, super repetitive combat, wonky stealth, weird mechanics that don't go anywhere or do anything, glitches, and terrible butt rock. soundtrack.
Courage to all. On your guard. Crosscut.
Yeah, and that's mostly what I had heard before. Next, we have a VR game here called Molecule Builder, which obviously is supposed to be kind of educational. Feels like it might be somewhat educational, but it also might be very boring. $14.99 English full audio. I'll put it on the follow list, but anything educational like this is probably going to be fairly dull. At a certain level, making molecules isn't the most informative way to learn things. Okay. Forced resurrection. I'll destroy a follower to start with.
I'm here, just like I said in my tip-off note.
And what else can we do? Do that. We can evolve here.
Our melody will never fade.
So he's gonna hit me with 9 damage.
You're too strong.
So XPlay is seemingly consistently now just going to put out videos, at least for with Adam Sessler, just kind of talking about games, and he's going to bring on other streamers and celebrities, and just kind of have these kind of interviews, as it were. Which, yeah, that doesn't quite feel like XPlay, as it were. If anything, it feels like what they're doing is interviewing streamers to see if they can be the new visual personalities for the new XPlay, and if maybe they can find some people that are actually decent writers, because Adam Sessler, while he can be the figurehead, he's pretty old, and his opinions probably can't be the only opinions getting repeated by other figureheads, so he needs decent writers or decent critics of some sort, and it's kind of hard to find decent video game critics, as it were. But then I'm not sure I really want to go along the journey of waiting many months until G4 actually releases to just see how the sausage is made and see them interacting and promoting each other. I think I'd personally be better off just playing video games and being a critic myself. And that might be true for a lot of people. Double Fine is supporting @Girls Make Games Kickstarter for a pixel platformer, pixel platform, I guess, not about marine research, What They Don't See, SEA. It was made by a group of middle school girls in 3-week Girls Make Games summer camp in Durham, North Carolina. The Kickstarter will let the girls continue to work their games and to hire a team to produce the game, which, yeah, I guess if you basically have a game jam and you make a decent concept, then you might have a decent enough project to actually sell at the end of that, but usually not. There is also the risk, certainly, of middle school girls pitching an idea and then all the programming and all the code really being made by just their parents or other people. Like, the idea of something being made by prodigies is an appealing sales tactic, even if it is not true, which I think it often isn't true.
Oh, come on!
That's one of the things about Danganronpa that's weird, is that there's this high schooler who is this ultimate novelist, and they're like, I don't think in the United States there's ever been anybody who is in high school that's written an amazingly well-received novel. I don't think there have been that many good novels in general in the U.S. in the last. So yeah, it would be very easy to lie and have Stephen King or somebody like Stephen King write a story and then say a high school student wrote it instead. Or just have somebody shadow write for a high schooler. There are, I guess, poet laureates that when Biden was sworn as president, there was this poet laureate character that really came out of nowhere and got a lot of attention. So I guess there might be some writing competition somewhere with some decent writers, but I guess there's just not enough interest there for that to evolve into actual novel sales. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article. The next Minecraft Dungeons DLC might be in the Nether. I think that interests about nobody, considering nobody really liked Minecraft Dungeons. Let's see, I think we're closer to the end than it seems, but we're still fairly far away. Let's try Portalcraft. Haven't played that in a way. Gematsu has a game called Avoid and Puss coming to the PS4, Xbox One, and Switch on February 19th, which seems like it might be a weirdo game. Yep, this trailer definitely seems like it is a joke troll game, which generally Gematsu doesn't get articles or write articles about joke troll games, so this one must have a decent amount of push behind it and promotion behind it. Next we have a game on Steam called Blackberry, which looks like a horror with some level of polish on it. Yeah, honestly, I can't just immediately dismiss this one. It's $7.19, English and Russian full audio, which that's unique. I have to put this on the fall list and see. The disconnected conceded, so I got a free victory, which that's nice. Which then I'm just working towards 3 more free victories. If I can get it. Likely. Let's see. Manga Gamer, according to TechRaptor, is running a Valentine's Day sale. Manga Gamer is known for selling visual novels, some of which, or a lot of which, have adult content on it. If not all of them being adult content. Manga Gamer is also kind of known for putting censored versions on Steam that weren't censored enough to Steam's standards, and then complaining and fighting with Steam. But then they thoroughly got the backing of basically nobody. So if it was a real industry-wide issue, the fact that it was pretty much Manga Gamer and nobody else that ever complained about their games getting pulled or not allowed on Steam really makes it seem like Manga Gamer was the one at fault. At least in retrospect, that's the way it seemed. There is a certain level of lack of promotion for adult games on Steam that's obvious, but it's kind of hard to say too many games are getting disallowed, except for the fact that Valve did come out directly and say that they weren't going to have games, whether they had adult content or not, have the art style, particularly of like one manga artist who made a visual novel, and the kids just look particularly young, and oddly in that game there wasn't, I think, any actual sexual content, and yet they were not comfortable listing that game. Just, well, I think in part that's because the artist had done lowly porn using that same art style in other places, which that's kind of a weird cancel culture concept, but they didn't expand on that idea. They got enough pushback that never really happened after the first couple of initial instances. Of course, next week may happen and we may have another story exactly like that.
Welcome to the city of hopes and dreams.
Yeah. I was actually struggling quite a bit to even figure out why the Gothic Lolita fashion style is called Gothic Lolita. Like, they're definitely dressed in Gothic outfits, but like they're not really dressed that much like Lolita would be depicted in the movie Lolita. And I don't know how she is described in the book, but there's an unreliable narrator. But I don't think the Gothic Lolita fashion style really matches with how she would be described as her dress in the book either. So the best thing I could think is that there is like a negligee called a baby doll. So maybe it was just a mistranslation of the Gothic Lolita fashion style being kind of similar to a baby doll negligee, and that then was mistranslated.
Coming at you.
You're gonna regret this.
Like,
Together
if
now.
anything, you would
It's natural for leaves to fall.
call the Gothic Lolita fashion style closer to like a Gothic vampire style. It looks more like that than anything else.
You're done for.
But maybe a Wikipedia search would tell me the answer.
Come to me.
Maybe I'll get around to that. Next, we have a game on Steam called Kinetic Edge, which looks like it's a marble roller game with a lot of polygons. At least that's what it looks like on the video. It's like a marble rolling race game. It's $9.74, English full audio. It's just way too much neon here for my eyes, so I just wouldn't want to play a game that looks like that. Okay. One. And then 2.
Command confirmed. Commencing mission.
And then 3.
Now the fight begins.
Data uplink complete. Eliminating target. Damage to unit confirmed.
There we go.
Natural for leaves to fall.
Next, we have a game on Steam called Forest Dash, which clearly is just a platformer game. Doesn't look terrible. Doesn't look unique enough. $2.99, English only. Here we have a game called Sky Rats, where you're playing an arena player versus player shooter of birds fighting birds, which is an interesting idea. $3.49, English only.
Damage to unit
Yep.
confirmed.
Yeah, you definitely would control a flying animal different than a plane. But yeah, this kind of does also feel like it's online PvP only, so I'd never play it, and it feels like something that would make a lot more sense as a
100% string and 0% fluff.
it would make a lot more sense as a
You're through.
cell phone game than a Steam game.
Watch as I wind and wind, darn it all. A spin and a twirl. There's our puppy the game.
There we go.
You pass.
See, next we have a game on Steam called Bug Force, which looks like a low effort first person shooter at $9.99. Looks like you might be inside of a computer or something. The Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake has been delayed. I did just watch a speedrun of the Prince of Persia previous remake that had a console-only DLC I never played, which I didn't miss out on much, frankly, but it kind of stinks that if I was ever going to buy the Prince of Persia remake, it would, on Steam, it would exclude that DLC, which that is kind of the case with more DLC than you think. Right. Just get rid of that card. So yeah, as far as Sands of Time, if this is the way the game is gonna look when it's remastered, that looks decent enough. Although the remake probably is gonna have a lot more to do with gameplay than story or visuals, because the extremely linear wall sliding and running is gonna feel very dated if you just try to make the game the way it is. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a remake of the Sands of Time that's actually very, very shorter, smaller, more of a story-based Telltale type game. It probably will have some gameplay in it, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's actually considerably little of that. X play points. Hmm.
100% string and 0% fluff. A spin and a twirl and up. There's our puppy to game.
See. What's more that we want to do?
He's feeling hungry.
Trying to actually win. Gamatsu has the same article here. Delayed to an unannounced date, no longer coming out March 18th. So the fact that they can't even move it to a specific date does imply that they've had some major trouble. Some of the DLC and content has been lost just because of bad backups and corrupted data, and will just never come back because of that, unfortunately. Let's do that.
Will usher in a new age. I like. Give me that.
Come on!
There we go.
Protein time.
Let's see. Next, we have a game on Steam called Beyond Horror Episode 1: A Father's Journey, which is just an asset flip first-person shooter.
Here goes! Into the blue!
Hmm.
And beyond!
This is $2.99 English full audio. Nothing there. I guess what we're gonna have to do is stop playing and stop covering the games that came out on Steam, and we'll just leave that for Monday, because this is 2 hours and 45 minutes. I want to wrap up, and we're not getting through the news very fast. Let's see. So we have a TechRaptor article here. Dream Engine's Nomad City releases next month. A temporary demo is out now. If you're interested in that, it looks like a tower defense game to me. Let's see. Game Matsu has an article. Kowloon Knights announces funding for 23 new titles from Kaizen Gameworks, Massive Damage, Night School, Lowe's Thunder, and more. I have a developer first video game investment fund. I haven't heard of any of these. I haven't heard of any of these companies. So, yeah, there's a whole bunch of companies. Like Frozen Byte is the developer of Trine, and I guess they're working on a game called Starbase, which is a space theme MMO. Night School Studio made Oxenfree and After Party. See if I can recognize any of these other companies. Although, frankly, I could probably recognize the names better than any of the companies. Spiritfarer. Let's see, Absolver I recognize. Opus I recognize. The Messenger I recognize. Oxenfree After Party. Desperados 3 I recognize. Paradise Killer I recognize. So this is just like a publishing company. He has done a bunch of deals with a bunch of companies that are more single A and double A developers. Which, okay. That sounds cool. Let's see, Gamma Switch has a blog here revisiting the fall of Resident Evil, which would be Resident Evil 6, almost certainly. Which is linking to like a YouTube video more than anything. Yeah, I don't know if going back and looking is at the failure of Resident Evil 6 is as necessary as it might seem. I wanted to take a moment to mention this tweet. Azatec, which makes liquid cooling products, put out this meme thing. 1 mask is this, and then 2 masks is this, where these would be the part you attach to the top of a CPU. So this is something you would do in computers if you had 2 CPUs on a server, and liquid cooling a server might be a great idea. So if this is supposed to be kind of a meme joke, is this how it works, they say? It's kind of ridiculous. But more importantly, I would like to point out, as much as like most of the liberal news in the United States loves Biden, they've done a very piss poor job of explaining this situation and explaining the idea behind 2 masks. It's not just because 1 in 95 gets like 99% or more of the masks of the particulates, and thus if you had 2, you would be increasing the odds of particulates being caught, being expelled from a person outward. That's not the reason why actual medical professionals are recommending and use 2 masks on the daily. The reason is they are wearing an N95 mask that filters, and then they are wearing a special surgical mask that has 2 different layers. One layer is hydrophobic on the outside, so any kind of particulates, coughs, sneezes, sprays are actually pushed away chemically, I guess, and on the inside of the surgical mask is a layer that is I want to say hydrophilic is the word, but hydroattractive to say the least. So on the inside of the surgical mask, if something does get through the 99% or of the N95 masks, it is then caught there. So they are very different masks doing very different things in conjunction. It's like having a HEPA filter in your air conditioner and then having a carbon pre-filter in front of that HEPA filter. The carbon pre-filter will catch the big amount of particles and dust and keep the HEPA filter cleaner and more viable for a longer time, where the HEPA filter will catch smaller particles. And yeah, the news has just been bad about explaining that and just turning it into a joke and a meme. Does this have anything to really do with video games? No. Did the liquid cooling company need to make a meme thing and put it on Twitter? No. More and more on Twitter, I'm seeing a lot of that, and it's just like, yeah, you probably shouldn't step into a field you don't know, and you probably shouldn't stick a toe into saying something potentially political. Moving on, Gamasutra has an article here. Mobile titles and domestic releases are driving revenue at Konami, which that would make a lot of sense because it's not like Konami is really listing any games outside of Japan, and mobile games are probably about the only thing that they are listing. So they have like eFootball Winning 11 2021, better known as eFootball PES 2021 in the West, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links. Not too many other listings that would be recognized in the West. Let's see. Gematsu has an article. Maximum Games is going to publish In Nightmare for the PS4 in 2021. This is a PlayStation China Hero Project horror action game, which, yeah, I kind of had forgotten about the China Hero Project, and we'll hear more about it, I guess, over the course of the next year or so. I had confused this game with Little Nightmares. There's too many games with Nightmare in the title, to say the least. That trailer is blurry. Blurry thumbnail. Seems like you've got a floating ghost and you're playing as a kid running around trying to avoid getting hit by the ghost and all kinds of monsters. This could just be a like platformer infinite runner. There might be very little actual game in this game, but those visuals do kind of scream like baby's first Silent Hill, which, you know, that might work for PlayStation. Let's see. Gematsu has Windjammers 2 Steve Miller in arcade mode revealer trailer and screenshots. So they're hyping up Windjammers. I don't know why YouTube's thumbnails are doing such a bad job at the moment, but YouTube itself is not playing the videos particularly bad. So I guess that's fine. Gematsu has an article. The World Ends With You, the animation, begins airing April 9th with a new trailer and visual. This is the anime spin-off of the game, which I'm not sure that's going to be coordinated to really push interest into buying. I believe there's a reboot or a sequel to the game, a remake of the game that's coming out. Yeah, by the time it comes out in the West, I wouldn't be surprised if the anime is not out in the West, so that might not have as much overlap as it should. Tech Raptor has a review, Immortals Phoenix Rising, a New God review. This was the DLC. So let's see how they did it. They gave it a 7.0. I don't think the main game was much better. In its first major DLC for Immortals Phoenix Rising, a New God offers a new area and a bunch of new puzzles. Unfortunately, it's far too restricted to offer some of the best parts of the base game. Pros, interesting puzzle, fun theming and story, new upgrades. Cons, almost entirely puzzles, far too rigid in its design. See, Gamma Sutra has an article. Mountain Type raises 5.5 million to accelerate development of its player versus player shooter, which, okay, I haven't heard of Mountain Type, and I don't know if they even have a name for its PvP shooter yet. Let's see. Well, this link is all in Chinese, so that doesn't mean anything to me. Tech Raptor has a review here. Neo's PC port is good enough, but it has some issues, which that kind of stinks, but whatever. I still probably, by the time I get around to playing Neo 2, it'll has a decent chance of being fixed. Here we have a game on Steam called the Build and Race Hot Rod game, which this looks like it's an asset flip thing, and the screenshots aren't loading. $8.99 English full audio. I think you're kind of gonna lose the racing element here in favor of building the hot rods. I do think at some point this is the future of racing games, though, is that we are going to have a AAA developer that literally has you remodel and build your hot rods and then you race them. Here's that article I talked about a while ago. Blue Fire is a beautiful but buggy union of Zelda and Dark Souls, which, okay, it was crashing all the time. They don't actually give it a review. Game is also available on the Nintendo Switch. I assume it's not crashing as much on the Switch. Here we have a game on Steam called Hell Shuffle, which looks like it's a card game. It might catch my attention, but the art is pretty generic here. Like, you're not even getting 3D models of the characters. Although something like that might actually help your game develop and grow instead of wasting a lot of budget to animate things. At first, you could always come back and reanimate things. I feel like Shadowverse, in a lot of ways, could come back and reanimate a lot of things. This game, though, is weird because it's single player only and it's $17.09. So I can put it on the follow list, but that price tag is really, really high. And a card deck builder is kind of a hard sell. I have so many games open, game tabs open, that I'm having to go through some just to get to the end. Here we have a game called Sky Seeker, which looks like it's a platformer where you just are supposed to go up and up. Looks like MS Paint graphics. It's coming soon, so that doesn't even matter. Here we have a game called Ellie, E-L-L-Y, which is a 2D platformer with terrible graphics. Also, $4.49 English only. Here we can see Neo 2, the complete edition, is mixed. So I'll put that on the follow list. It's like, yeah, that stinks for it. Certainly. Here we have a game called Lumpy on Steam, which looks like it's nothing. Tiny World. They're calling it a collectathon relaxing casual game. 99 cents English full audio. That just feels like a low effort game. Gamatsu has the Bokohime project now available for PC in Japan. This is the cross-dressing visual novel previously launched on the PS4 and Switch. I didn't think I'd be hearing any more talk about Bokuhime Project. If it's coming out in Japan on PC, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point they try to release it on Steam. We might even hear some controversy is saying that Steam rejects it, but I wouldn't be surprised if they don't. What I haven't heard is that it was not a major success. It's a very niche on top of niche to sell a visual novel and then sell a visual novel around a character kind of being forced to cross-dress. Moving on, Gematsu has an article, the Shadowverse World Grand Prix 2020 has been postponed. I didn't even know this existed. This kind of goes to show how like Shadowverse is very much a Japanese collectible card game and does not get a lot of coverage and following in the West. Let's see. TechCraft has an article here. Hauma offers a taste of sweet revenge. Which, yeah, this looks like some kind of visual novel that's fairly well published. It's coming out sometime in 2021. Looks slightly interesting, but it could also be nothing. This is definitely a like water paint style of animation that you definitely don't see in games very often. And that brings me to the Humble Bundle, which, with the exception of the Asmodee bundle, I doubt there's a second game bundle to talk about. Nope. And then that can bring me to Steam, where they're doing this little festival between February 3rd and February 9th of Play What's Next, which is basically, wow, this is super glitchy over here. I guess that's because this scroll bar specifically is designed to copy whatever colors are behind it somewhat, so it's all over the place because the colors are backwards here. Anyways, there's a whole bunch of games coming soon that they're promoting here, but not a lot of them are recognizable. I recognize Little Nightmares 2 and maybe In My Shadow and maybe Lost Words I've seen. But even for somebody who watches and looks at every game that comes out or tries to, a lot of these have quickly been forgotten, or I've just completely missed them because they haven't actually been released yet. There is a decent amount of visual polish on some of these games that they're highlighting, so it probably was a decent point. Here they're promoting Lust from Beyond, where the lady has a severed hand on her boob. Like Glitchpunk. Yeah, I recall these. But honestly, it's just kind of like a festival, and there is different categories you can look here, but since all of these games are coming soon, at best you can watch someone else play the game or put a game on your wish list. Your demo upcoming games, you watch live streams and chat with the devs, which is certainly the long play, as it were, for trying to have a trying to have something sell on Steam. Yeah, it's definitely a long play to actual unit sales. And with that, I will go back to my Twitter feed. There is a little tweaker for Ryzen chipsets, and version 3.0 came out, release candidate 3. It's called CTR. I let that run. It takes an incredibly long amount of time for it to run and tune, and frankly, I'm not 100% sure it actually applied its results or does apply its results. At a certain level, me overclocking my CPU is ridiculous and unnecessary, and it's just going to probably cause my computer to run hotter and pour more heat out into my room, But what can I say? I still ended up doing it, so that was not only a waste of time, probably. HBO has announced a movie on the GameStop stock market saga, which the whole GameStop thing is pretty much dead at this point. The price has adjusted itself, whether naturally or unnaturally, back down quite a bit. And apparently Twitch's purple screen of death is now reportedly affecting in-game embeds, which I didn't even know Twitch had a purple screen of death. A mobile developer named Wildlife opens a new studio in California, according to Gamma Sutra. I'll just mention that without opening a tab, since that's not that interesting to me. And seems like all my tweets are in weird order. TechCrafter has an article we'll talk about on Monday about Heritage Auctions talking about the gaming marketplace and selling old games at a high price. Well, I guess because it's Friday, there's just not that much else going on. So that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist.